"Ma'am, step away from that door before this turns into something you don't want." The words cut through the crisp Monday morning air so sharply that every nearby conversation seemed to disappear at once. The revolving glass doors of Orion Nexus Technologies reflected the pale gold sunrise, while dozens of employees slowed their pace, their coffee cups suspended halfway to their lips as their eyes drifted toward the woman standing quietly on the front plaza. Maya Brooks didn't move. A soft breeze lifted a loose strand of her dark curls as she tightened her hand around the strap of an Old Navy backpack resting against one shoulder. She looked more like someone arriving after a long overnight flight than a corporate executive about to lead one of the largest technology companies in America into its next chapter. Her charcoal sneakers carried the faint dust of airport terminals. Her light gray jacket was wrinkled from hours inside a plane. Beside her rested a worn laptop bag that had clearly seen better days. Somewhere between Seattle and Charlotte, the airline had misplaced her suitcase, leaving everything she had planned to wear for her first day somewhere she couldn't reach. None of that mattered to her. Today wasn't about appearances. It was about beginning again. Officer Daniel Carter adjusted the radio clip to his shoulder before taking 2 deliberate steps closer. His expression carried the calm certainty of someone convinced he had already figured everything out. "I asked you a question," he said evenly. "Who are you here to see?" Maya offered a polite smile. "Good morning. My name is Maya Brooks. I'm expected inside." Carter glanced toward the towering headquarters behind her before looking back at the backpack, the faded luggage tag hanging from its zipper, and the visitor standing alone without anyone greeting her. His eyes lingered on the employee badge holder around her neck, still empty because Human Resources hadn't issued her credentials yet. "Expected by who?" he asked. "Human Resources," Maya answered. "They're waiting for me upstairs." A quiet chuckle escaped from somewhere behind them. 2 young software engineers exchanged uncertain glances before continuing toward the entrance. Another employee slowed just enough to whisper, "Maybe she's at the wrong building." The words floated through the cool air without anyone challenging them. Maya heard every syllable, yet her expression remained calm. She had spent too many years walking into rooms where people noticed everything except her accomplishments. Airports, research conferences, investment meetings, innovation summits. The assumptions almost always arrived before introductions did. The polished steel letters mounted above the entrance shimmered beneath the morning light. Orion Nexus Technologies. In less than an hour, those same halls would officially become her responsibility. She had spent 15 years designing artificial intelligence systems trusted by hospitals, emergency response centers, and aerospace companies across 3 continents. She had turned down prestigious offers from Silicon Valley giants because Orion promised something different, a chance to rebuild an aging company from the inside out. Only 7 people inside the building knew she had accepted the position. Everyone else expected the announcement later that morning. Carter folded his arms. "I'm going to need you to leave the property until someone confirms your story." Around them, more employees gathered near the entrance without appearing obvious about it. Phones stayed tucked away, but curious eyes reflected across the glass walls like silent witnesses. Maya slowly looked toward the towering building she had dreamed about leading for months. The doors stood only a few yards away, yet suddenly they felt impossibly distant. She drew one quiet breath, meeting the officer's gaze with steady composure. "Officer," she said gently, "if you would simply call Human Resources, they'll explain everything." Officer Daniel Carter did not reach for his radio. Instead, he studied Maya for another long moment, as though patience itself had become evidence against her. Around them, the steady rhythm of polished dress shoes crossing the granite plaza continued, but conversations remained unusually quiet. People glanced over their shoulders before disappearing through the revolving doors, each wondering how long the unexpected scene might last. Maya lowered her hand from the strap of her backpack and kept her posture relaxed. She had learned years ago that confidence did not always come from speaking louder. Sometimes it came from refusing to let another person's assumptions dictate your emotions. Her overnight flight from Zurich had landed just before dawn. After waiting nearly an hour at baggage claim, she had watched the final carousel stop turning without her suitcase ever appearing. The airline representative apologized politely, promising it would arrive within 24 hours. Inside that missing suitcase was the Navy business suit she had chosen weeks earlier, along with the leather portfolio containing handwritten notes for her first executive meeting. She had considered buying new clothes before coming downtown, but the orientation schedule had already been carefully arranged. Being late on her first day felt worse than arriving underdressed. So she had simply straightened her jacket, polished the dust from her sneakers with a paper towel inside the airport restroom, and ordered a rideshare directly to Orion Nexus Technologies. During the drive across Charlotte, she watched the city slowly wake beneath the soft orange glow of sunrise. Coffee shops unlocked their doors. Delivery trucks rolled through quiet intersections. Office lights flickered on one floor after another. Everything carried the familiar feeling of possibility that came with the beginning of a new chapter. Her thoughts drifted briefly to her late father, who had repaired old computers from a tiny workshop behind their neighborhood library. He used to tell her that machines never cared about a person's appearance. They only responded to knowledge, patience, and precision. Those words had stayed with her through every scholarship interview, every graduate research project, every boardroom where she had been underestimated before introducing herself. A black luxury sedan turned slowly into the circular driveway before continuing toward the executive parking entrance, unnoticed by almost everyone gathered outside. Maya remained focused on the conversation unfolding in front of her. Officer Carter finally spoke again. "You still have not shown me an employee badge." "I cannot receive one until Human Resources checks me in," Maya answered gently. "That is standard procedure for new executive hires." Carter shook his head. "Executive hires do not usually arrive carrying one backpack." His words were not loud, yet several people standing nearby heard them clearly enough to exchange uncomfortable glances. Maya looked toward the towering glass windows where the morning sun reflected like liquid gold across the surface. Behind those walls, hundreds of engineers, designers, analysts, and researchers were preparing for a company meeting that would introduce a new vision for the future. She had spent months studying every department, every financial report, every software platform, determined to earn their trust through results rather than titles. None of them knew she was already standing only a few yards away. She reached carefully into the outer pocket of her backpack and removed a neatly folded folder containing travel documents, identification, and a printed confirmation from Human Resources. She extended it toward the officer with steady hands. "Everything I have is right here," she said calmly. "Please take whatever time you need to verify it." Carter looked at the folder, but made no move to accept it. The silence between them settled over the entrance like a gathering storm that had not yet decided whether it would pass quietly or change the course of everyone's morning. Officer Daniel Carter let the folder remain suspended between them for another second before saying, "Keep it." His voice carried the quiet confidence of someone who believed experience mattered more than paperwork. Maya slowly lowered the documents without showing frustration. The cool morning breeze rustled the edges of the pages before she slipped them carefully back into the folder. Behind the towering glass walls, employees continued flowing into the lobby, each scanning an identification badge that unlocked the security gates with a soft electronic chime. Outside, however, time seemed strangely frozen. Every passing minute brought a few more curious faces, lingering just long enough to wonder what was happening before disappearing inside. A young intern balancing a laptop case whispered to his colleague, "She probably walked into the wrong headquarters." His friend shrugged. Security never stops people without a reason. Maya heard neither judgment nor sympathy in their voices, only quiet assumptions built from incomplete information. She had encountered them countless times throughout her career. Years earlier, when she presented machine learning research at an international conference in Boston, several attendees had mistaken her for hotel staff before she walked onto the keynote stage. During a government technology summit in Washington, one executive had asked whether she could refill the coffee station moments before introducing the afternoon panel on artificial intelligence ethics. She had never forgotten those moments, but she had refused to let them define her. Her father often reminded her that dignity was not something another person could hand you or take away. It was something you carried within yourself, especially when nobody else recognized it. Officer Carter glanced toward the entrance again before resting one hand near the radio clipped to his uniform. "Until I verify who you are not entering this building." His tone remained controlled, almost routine, as though he had repeated similar instructions hundreds of times before. Maya nodded politely. Then please verify it. The answer arrived without irritation, without sarcasm, and without raising her voice. That unexpected calm unsettled several people standing nearby more than an argument would have. They had expected frustration. Instead, they saw patience. Across the plaza, two members of the maintenance crew paused beside a flower bed, quietly watching the exchange while pretending to organize gardening equipment. Near the valet station, a rideshare driver remained parked a little longer than necessary, curious about why such a simple conversation had stretched into several minutes. The headquarters itself seemed almost symbolic in the growing sunlight. 40 stories of polished glass reflected the blue Carolina sky so brightly that the building appeared almost weightless, a monument to innovation built on confidence and ambition. Inside, conference rooms were filling with senior leaders preparing for one of the company's most significant announcements in years. Presentation screens glowed with carefully designed graphics. Fresh coffee filled executive lounges. Printed agendas rested neatly beside leather notebooks. Only a handful of people knew that the guest of honor had not yet reached the lobby. Maya checked the time on her watch. The orientation meeting would begin in less than 30 minutes. Missing it would delay introductions that had been scheduled for weeks. Still, she resisted every temptation to push past the growing obstacle in front of her. She believed leadership began long before someone stepped behind a podium. It began in moments exactly like this, when character mattered more than authority. Officer Carter studied her once more, then slowly removed a small notepad from his pocket. "What company are you claiming hired you?" he asked. Maya answered without hesitation. Orion Nexus Technologies. Position. His pen hovered above the paper. Maya met his eyes with the same steady composure she had carried since sunrise. "Chief Technology Officer," she said quietly. For a heartbeat, absolute silence settled across the entrance before a few restrained laughs drifted through the morning air from employees who assumed they had just heard the most unbelievable answer imaginable. The quiet laughter faded almost as quickly as it had begun, leaving behind an uncomfortable stillness that settled across the entrance plaza. Officer Daniel Carter looked up from his notepad, studying Maya with an expression that mixed disbelief with quiet certainty. "Chief Technology Officer," he repeated slowly, as though saying the title aloud was enough to expose it as impossible. Several employees exchanged amused glances before slipping through the revolving doors, while others lingered just outside, pretending to check messages on their phones even though their attention never left the unfolding scene. Maya simply nodded. "Yes, sir." There was no challenge in her voice, no trace of sarcasm, only calm conviction. Carter closed the notepad with a firm motion and tucked it back into his pocket. "That position was announced internally last week," he said. "The person taking that role would not be standing outside without credentials." Maya answered gently. "The airline lost my luggage overnight. My temporary badge is waiting with human resources." Convenient explanation. It happens more often than people think. Carter exhaled slowly before reaching for the radio attached to his shoulder. Maya watched him carefully, hoping he was finally about to verify her identity. Instead, he pressed the transmit button. "Building security, this is Officer Carter. I need additional personnel at the main entrance. Possible unauthorized individual refusing to leave corporate property." The words echoed across the polished stone entrance far louder than the radio itself. Conversations nearby stopped once again. A pair of reception staff standing just inside the glass doors looked toward each other with visible uncertainty. Maya lowered her eyes for only a moment before lifting them again. Her breathing remained steady. She remembered another morning years earlier when she had waited outside a research laboratory in California because someone assumed she was delivering food instead of leading the day's robotics presentation. Back then, she had allowed embarrassment to fill the silence. Experience had taught her something different since then. Silence could also become a place where dignity lived. Within a minute, two private security officers stepped through the revolving doors wearing navy jackets embroidered with the Orion Nexus logo. One was a middle-aged woman named Linda Chavez. The other, Marcus Ellis, carried himself with the quiet professionalism of someone used to solving problems without creating larger ones. Carter gestured toward Maya before either of them spoke. "She claims to be the company's new chief technology officer." Neither security officer laughed. Instead, Linda looked at Maya with careful curiosity. "Ma'am, do you have identification?" Maya immediately handed over her driver's license and the printed human resources confirmation. Linda accepted both documents politely and began reading them. Marcus glanced between Maya and Officer Carter without saying anything. Carter folded his arms. Those papers could have been printed anywhere. Maya answered before Linda could respond. "There is a direct phone number for human resources on the confirmation page. If you call it, they can verify everything within a minute." Linda's eyes paused on the document. She could clearly see the company letterhead, the executive onboarding schedule, and the signature from Sarah Collins, Vice President of Human Resources. Before she reached for her phone, Carter interrupted. "Do not waste their time unless we know this paperwork is legitimate." Linda hesitated. Marcus shifted his weight slightly, sensing the growing tension. Maya remained composed despite the dozens of curious eyes now fixed upon her from both sides of the glass entrance. She looked toward the 40-story headquarters glowing beneath the bright Carolina morning sun. Somewhere above those windows, conference room lights were already on. Executives were gathering. Clocks continued moving. Every passing second carried the company closer to an announcement that could not begin without the person still standing outside its front door. Linda Chavez kept her eyes on the printed confirmation for several more seconds before looking toward Officer Daniel Carter. "Everything appears professionally prepared," she said carefully. "There is an employee identification number, an executive orientation schedule, and a direct extension for human resources." Carter barely glanced at the papers before answering. "Professional documents can be fabricated." His response landed heavily in the morning air. Marcus Ellis shifted his attention toward the growing crowd gathering just inside the glass lobby. Employees were no longer pretending not to watch. Some stood with coffee cups forgotten in their hands. Others quietly delayed entering the elevators, sensing they were witnessing something unusual. Maya remained exactly where she had been since the conversation began. The sunlight now climbed higher above the skyline, reflecting across the polished granite beneath her feet until the entrance shimmered with warm light. She looked toward Linda and offered a calm smile. "You do not have to believe me. You only have to verify me." Linda nodded almost instinctively and slipped her hand toward her company phone. Before she could unlock the screen, Carter raised one hand. "Hold on." Linda paused. "Officer, verification is the quickest way to resolve this." Carter's jaw tightened slightly. "Or it validates a distraction while executives are preparing for an important event upstairs." Maya listened without interrupting. She had spent years leading international engineering teams where every decision depended upon facts rather than assumptions. Watching simple verification become a debate felt strangely familiar. The problem had never been information. The problem was often deciding who deserved to be believed before the information arrived. A low mechanical hum echoed across the circular driveway as several black executive vehicles approached the front entrance in perfect sequence. Their glossy paint reflected the morning sky while uniformed drivers slowed beside the curb. Employees immediately straightened their posture. Quiet conversation stopped. Even those who had been watching Maya discreetly now turned toward the arriving motorcade. Linda lowered her phone. Marcus instinctively stepped back to clear the entrance. Carter looked toward the vehicles with visible relief. "Perfect timing," he muttered. "Executive leadership can confirm whether anyone is expecting her." Maya followed the movement with calm eyes. She recognized one of the vehicles from the orientation packet Sarah Collins had emailed days earlier. It belonged to the chief executive officer. She drew one slow breath, neither hopeful nor anxious, simply prepared. The first sedan came to a smooth stop. A chauffeur stepped out, walking quickly to open the rear passenger door. Behind it, another executive vehicle rolled into position. The polished glass entrance reflected flashing streaks of sunlight across the line of arriving cars, creating an almost cinematic stillness over the entire plaza. Inside the lobby, reception staff quietly arranged themselves near the front desk. Department managers adjusted jackets and straightened name badges. Somewhere on the upper executive floor, presentation screens were waiting for a meeting that was scheduled to begin in only a few minutes. Officer Carter stood taller, convinced the next several moments would settle the matter once and for all. He glanced briefly toward Maya before saying in a measured voice, "Please remain exactly where you are." Maya simply nodded. "I have not moved this entire morning." Her answer carried neither resentment nor defiance. Only truth. The rear door of the lead sedan slowly opened. A polished leather shoe appeared first, followed by the steady figure of a tall man in a tailored navy suit. His silver hair caught the early sunlight as he stepped onto the granite walkway with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to leading billion-dollar decisions before breakfast. Every nearby employee immediately recognized him. Ethan Reynolds had arrived. For one impossibly long moment, Ethan Reynolds did not speak. The morning breeze drifted across the entrance plaza, carrying only the faint rustle of suit jackets and the distant hum of traffic beyond the campus gates. Every employee standing near the lobby instinctively straightened, expecting the chief executive officer to acknowledge Officer Daniel Carter first. Instead, Ethan's eyes settled on Maya Brooks. There was no confusion in his expression, no hesitation, only recognition. Maya remained exactly where she stood, her worn backpack resting lightly against one shoulder, her folded documents still in her hands. The sunlight reflected softly across the glass facade behind her, outlining her silhouette against 40 stories of steel and crystal. She offered the same calm smile she had carried throughout the morning, neither triumphant nor wounded, simply patient. Officer Carter stepped forward with professional confidence. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. We have a situation involving an individual claiming to be an executive hire." Ethan lifted one hand slightly, not dismissively, but enough to pause the explanation before it gathered momentum. His attention never left Maya. Another quiet second passed. Around them, the entire entrance seemed suspended outside of time. Receptionists stood motionless behind the lobby desk. Engineers waiting for elevators forgot to press their floor buttons. Even Linda Chavez and Marcus Ellis remained silent, sensing that something far more important than a security question was unfolding before them. Ethan finally began walking. His polished shoes crossed the granite plaza with measured steps that echoed softly through the unusual silence. He did not turn toward Officer Carter. He did not ask for identification. He did not request clarification. He walked directly toward Maya. Carter blinked, then instinctively shifted aside to clear the path. Maya watched the chief executive officer approach without moving an inch. She remembered the final video conference they had shared 3 weeks earlier, discussing artificial intelligence ethics, cybersecurity resilience, and the future culture of Orion Nexus technologies. Ethan had ended that meeting with a single sentence she had quietly carried across an ocean. "We are not hiring you because you know the technology. We are hiring you because you know how to lead people." Those words returned to her now as clearly as if he had spoken them only moments ago. Ethan stopped in front of her, his face warming into a genuine smile that erased every trace of corporate formality. "Dr. Brooks," he said warmly, "welcome to Orion Nexus Technologies." Before anyone could process the greeting, he extended both hands. Maya accepted the handshake with quiet confidence. There was no dramatic flourish, no raised voice. Only two professionals greeting each other with mutual respect. Yet the effect rippled across the plaza like a stone dropped into perfectly still water. Officer Carter's expression slowly changed as realization replaced certainty. Linda Chavez looked down at the human resources confirmation still resting in her hands before looking back toward Maya. Marcus Ellis quietly exhaled, understanding at last why every document had appeared authentic. Through the towering glass walls, dozens of employees stared in complete silence. Some exchanged stunned glances. Others lowered their eyes, replaying every assumption they had made during the past 20 minutes. Ethan released Maya's hand, but remained beside her. His voice stayed calm, though every word carried effortlessly across the entrance. "I apologize that your first morning with us began outside instead of inside. We have been waiting for you." Maya smiled gently. "Thank you, Ethan. I believe I am right on time." The quiet dignity in her answer settled over the crowd more powerfully than any speech could have. No accusation followed. No anger surfaced. Only the unmistakable feeling that truth had finally arrived. And with it came a silence that seemed to ask everyone standing there the same uncomfortable question about how quickly appearances can become judgment. The silence lingered for another heartbeat before Ethan Reynolds slowly turned toward the entrance where dozens of employees stood frozen behind a glass. His calm voice carried naturally across the plaza without ever rising. "Everyone, before we begin today's executive meeting, There is someone I would like all of you to meet." The revolving doors opened almost automatically as more department heads arrived, only to stop in surprise when they realized the meeting had already begun outside. Sarah Collins hurried through the lobby carrying a slim leather portfolio pressed tightly against her side. The moment she saw Maya standing beside Ethan, relief washed across her face. "Dr. Brooks," she said with an apologetic smile, "I have been trying to reach you since 6:30 this morning after the airline notified us about your luggage. We were worried something had happened during your trip." Maya nodded gently. "I made it here just fine." Sarah glanced briefly toward Officer Daniel Carter before opening the portfolio. Inside rested a polished titanium identification badge attached to a dark blue executive lanyard. Beneath it sat a welcome folder embossed with the Orion Nexus Technologies logo in silver lettering. Sarah stepped forward with both hands and presented the badge respectfully. "Welcome to your first day as our Chief Technology Officer." The words settled over the plaza with astonishing weight. Nobody laughed this time. The employees who had whispered moments earlier now stood completely still. One young engineer quietly lowered his eyes. Another folded his arms across his chest, embarrassed by the assumptions he had made before knowing a single fact. Linda Chavez looked toward Marcus Ellis, who answered only with the smallest nod. The documents had been genuine all along. Ethan accepted the executive badge from Sarah before placing it carefully around Maya's neck himself. The polished card caught the morning sunlight, revealing her photograph beside four simple words printed beneath her name. Chief Technology Officer. There could no longer be any doubt. Officer Carter stared at the badge as though it belonged to another reality entirely. His shoulders, once squared with absolute certainty, slowly relaxed beneath the growing weight of understanding. Every decision he had made that morning replayed silently in his mind. He remembered refusing to review the confirmation letter. He remembered questioning the backpack, the missing luggage, the lack of a temporary badge. None of those details had actually proven anything. They had only confirmed what he had already decided to believe. Ethan looked across the gathering crowd. Dr. Maya Brooks joins us after leading international artificial intelligence research programs that have improved emergency medical systems, transportation safety, and cybersecurity infrastructure across multiple countries. We searched for nearly a year to find the right person for this position. Today she officially begins leading the future of Orion Nexus Technologies. A wave of quiet applause slowly spread through the employees standing near the entrance. It began hesitantly with only a few people, then gradually grew until nearly everyone present was clapping. The applause was not loud or theatrical. It sounded thoughtful, almost reflective, as though many were applauding not only Maya's achievement, but also the lesson unfolding before their own eyes. Maya looked across the faces gathered around her. Some smiled warmly. Others seemed uncomfortable. A few could not quite meet her eyes. She understood every expression because she had seen each one before throughout her career. Yet she felt no satisfaction in anyone's embarrassment. Her father had once told her that true success was never measured by proving someone wrong. It was measured by giving people the opportunity to become better after discovering they had been mistaken. As the applause slowly faded into the bright Carolina morning, the headquarters behind them no longer felt like a distant building she had struggled to enter. For the first time that day, it finally felt like the place where she belonged. The applause gradually faded, leaving behind a quiet that felt warmer than the silence that had greeted Maya only minutes earlier. Ethan Reynolds looked toward the entrance and smiled gently. "We have a company to lead," he said. "Let us begin by remembering that innovation starts with listening before judging." The executives started moving toward the lobby, but one person remained rooted to the granite walkway. Officer Daniel Carter stared at the ground for several long seconds before taking a slow breath. The confidence that had shaped every decision that morning had disappeared, replaced by something far heavier. He walked toward Maya without rushing, stopping a respectful distance away. The plaza became quiet once more as nearby employees instinctively paused to watch. Carter removed his cap and held it at his side. "Dr. Brooks," he said, his voice steady but noticeably softer than before, "I owe you an apology." Maya met his eyes without speaking. "I made assumptions before I looked at the facts," he continued. "You asked me several times to verify your identity. You remained respectful from beginning to end, and I chose certainty over verification. I am genuinely sorry. No one interrupted him. Even the revolving doors seemed to turn more slowly as people waited for Maya's response. She glanced briefly at the glass headquarters towering above them before looking back at the officer. The morning sunlight reflected across the silver lettering of her new executive badge, casting a faint shimmer against her jacket. Thank you for saying that, she replied quietly. Apologies matter because they create the opportunity to do something better next time. Carter nodded, though the weight in his expression remained. I understand if today changes how you see me. Maya smiled gently. One morning does not define an entire person. What defines us is what we choose after we recognize our mistakes. Her answer surprised nearly everyone standing nearby. There was no humiliation waiting for him. No lecture. No attempt to make the moment larger than it already was. She simply offered him the same dignity she had hoped to receive herself. Ethan watched the exchange with quiet approval before stepping closer. Dr. Brooks, he said, our leadership team has been discussing a company-wide initiative on inclusive decision-making. After everything that happened this morning, your perspective would be invaluable. Maya thought for only a moment before answering. If we are serious about building better technology, we also have to build better habits. Artificial intelligence learns from data. Human beings learn from experience. Both improve when we are willing to question our first conclusions. Several employees exchanged thoughtful glances. Sarah Collins smiled as she opened a notebook and quietly wrote something down. Marcus Ellis folded his arms with a small nod of agreement. Even Linda Chavez looked toward Officer Carter with an expression that held understanding instead of criticism. Maya turned back toward the officer. Would you be willing to participate in that program? Carter looked surprised. You would want me involved? Especially you, Maya answered. People learn best from those who are honest enough to admit they still have something to learn. For the first time that morning, a faint smile appeared on Carter's face. It was small, almost uncertain, but genuine. Then I would be honored, he said. Ethan looked around at the employees gathering inside the lobby. There is our first lesson as a company, he said calmly. Respect is not proven when everything goes according to plan. It is proven when we discover we were wrong and choose to grow instead of defending our pride. No one applauded this time. They did not need to. The lesson settled quietly into every corner of the bright morning, carried not by speeches or titles, but by the simple decision to answer misunderstanding with grace instead of resentment. The executive conference room overlooked the Charlotte skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that shimmered beneath the bright Carolina afternoon sun. Hours had passed since the unexpected morning outside, yet its lesson quietly lingered in every conversation throughout Orion Nexus Technologies. Maya Brooks stood alone for a brief moment before the meeting began, resting one hand lightly against the cool glass as she watched the city stretch toward the horizon. Far below, traffic flowed with steady purpose, each car moving toward a destination unseen by everyone else. She smiled softly, remembering something her father once told her while repairing an old computer on a wooden workbench years ago. People are a little like machines, he had said. When something stops working, you do not begin by blaming it. You begin by understanding it. The conference room door opened gently behind her. Ethan Reynolds entered first, followed by Sarah Collins and the rest of the executive leadership team. Nobody mentioned the events of that morning. They no longer needed to. Maya walked to the head of the conference table where a small brushed aluminum nameplate waited beneath the glow of recessed lights. It read simply, Dr. Maya Brooks, Chief Technology Officer. She paused for only a second before taking her seat. Across the room, presentation screens illuminated with the company's new strategic vision. Innovation through trust. Ethan noticed Maya reading the words and smiled quietly. They seem even more appropriate now, he said. Maya nodded. Technology only earns trust when people do. The meeting unfolded with thoughtful discussion, ambitious ideas, and careful planning for the years ahead. Engineers spoke openly. Department leaders asked difficult questions. Young managers who had never before addressed the executive team found the confidence to contribute. The atmosphere felt different from any boardroom Maya had entered before, not because everyone suddenly agreed, but because everyone listened before responding. Late that afternoon, as employees began leaving for the day, Officer Daniel Carter completed one final walk around the entrance plaza. The granite walkway looked exactly as it had that morning, yet everything felt different. The shadows stretched longer across the polished stone, while warm sunlight reflected softly from the glass walls above. Before returning to his patrol vehicle, Carter glanced toward the lobby one last time. Through the transparent entrance, he could see Maya speaking with a group of young interns gathered around a digital display. She listened more than she spoke, smiling as each student shared ideas with growing confidence. Titles no longer mattered inside that conversation. Curiosity did. Carter lowered his eyes for a quiet moment, then placed his cap back on with renewed purpose before continuing his patrol. Inside the building, Maya finished answering the interns' questions and prepared to leave the conference area. As she passed the main lobby, she caught her reflection in the towering glass beside the entrance where the morning had begun. The same gray jacket, the same worn backpack, the same traveler whose suitcase still had not arrived. Only one detail had changed. Around her neck rested the executive badge that reflected the fading sunlight with quiet brilliance. She looked at it for only an instant before turning toward the elevators. The polished doors opened without hesitation. As they slowly closed again, the final rays of daylight caught the silver letters beneath her name. Chief Technology Officer. Outside, the evening breeze moved gently through the trees lining the campus, carrying away the echoes of assumptions that no longer belonged there. The building stood in peaceful silence, not because everyone had been perfect, but because one person had answered prejudice with patience, authority with humility, and misunderstanding with grace. In the quiet reflection of the glass, justice needed no applause. It was already visible.